noted, we are now joined by Honorable Fred MUKASA MBIDDE, who is a member of the East African Legislative Assembly and will be ending his term in December. But also back home, a seasoned politician, the Vice President of the Democratic Party. Very interesting as we are discussing the topic of today, which is why we have political parties, but we want also to look at sustaining these political parties. Honorable MUKASA MBIDDE, I want to first get it from you, because when we are making political party comparisons, I find it very hard for Uganda's case to sell out political parties. I don't know. You are Vice President of a political party, but let's begin at that.
Yeah, in Uganda, we have got registered political parties. As to whether the same operation, it is a question. Not even one. And a lot of people have been making mistakes, thinking that because we have got a government, therefore, the NRM party is in government. Now, that is not the case. We have a government that is preceded by revolutionary work, where the protagonist was the president himself. Now, his revolutionary activities started way back before even anybody thought of establishing the national resistance movement. In fact, when you look at the constitution of the registered national resistance movement, the preamble is to the effect that it gives details of the historicity of that party and what it has achieved. Now, the achievement of that party, which was registered in 2005, the achievements date back beyond 1979. Now, that tells you that that is not actually what they are talking about. It becomes like a lackadaisical. You cannot tell me that somebody who was born yesterday was born with a history of 20 years before such birth took place. So, and for us in law, evidence of existence of a political party is by its registration certificate. Therefore, the date of birth for NRM is 205. But I can tell you that when, of course, the president himself has grown to a stage that you can describe him as an institution himself. And clearly that's why I shudder when people promise that they are heading for an election in which they are going to defeat him. First of all, it is a fact that anyone and that has existed for over that year, appointed all institutions. The majority of all of those that were seniors to him on his arrival are dead. So clearly he has witnessed the birth of all institutions, and they are all his own, in proper interpretation, his own task forces, including the electoral commission. Then you promise people that clearly you are going to shock him with a win. Now, those are called dead recognists. So the political parties in Uganda are just registered entities. Because if they were political parties, what is the basis of their existence? What is the objective reason that makes it a logical necessity for them to exist? It is not ideological. You do not find any member of a political party conscious of the ideological orientation of such a political party. There are very few. Even us, we know ideologies, but when you look at the operationalization of even how we espouse political and economic opinion, even the governance, for example, the governance system in Uganda, you cannot tell me that you look at the NRM party and you think that it has espoused the economic processes that clearly have informed the trends and trajectories and interventions that government has enjoyed. When you look at the debates in parliament, no member of parliament stands up to debate, and you know that because that person comes from the Uganda People's Congress,
yes,
which is ideally, at least on inception, a social democratic institution that would be looking at, for example, trade democracy, it would be looking at equal opportunities for all, it would be, ideally that is
what... The debates are not in tandem with their ideologies, of their political parties.
Yes, when you
find... Like one, you know that these ones, when their representative stands up, his thinking is tailor-made to ideology. This is individual thinking.
People vary in individual opinion. Even us, I represent Uganda. I do not know whether I have ever met anybody in the government, for example, and that such a meeting was intended to espouse opinions that we would take in terms of unanimous decision or proposal to the East African Legislative Assembly on behalf of Uganda. We espouse and bend opinions. That is why when you are electing members, please look at those that will substantially bend opinions that are helpful for integration purposes for Uganda. Otherwise, you find fellows looking for jobs and you think those are now electable. They will just go there, use their handbrakes and begin eating. Eating is okay. They stay in hotels, and for 10 years, Uganda has benefited from it.
Now, Honorable, let's get back to these sustaining political parties. You've talked about ideology. You've talked about having political parties on paper. But recently we are seeing political parties kind of coming up with all reasons to work together. For example, we have the Democratic Party where the Vice President. Recently you had a cooperation agreement with NRM. I saw your party president campaigning for your candidate. Which party president is a minister in this sitting government? Where do we draw these? Are they of any tangible benefit to building party democracy?
First of all, and that is why I told you, when the president signed, the president of DP, who ideally is the president general of DP, signed the cooperation agreement with the chairman of the National Resistance Movement. Clearly, that has nothing to do with government. So when now the two begin to campaign for their own independent candidates, clearly, of course, obviously, then, when you look at the Political Parties and Organizations Act, it provides for a merger. Now, when a merger is administered by parties, one of them dies and is acquired by the other. Or the merger definitely now produces new symbols, new everything is one. But a corporation obviously now leaves each and every entity in its own. What clearly now is governed by collective responsibility is only governing the president, who himself now is a minister. Once a decision is taken, collectively, he has to kowtow to a decision that has been taken. But even his opinion is in the cabinet until a decision is taken, must be the opinions of the Democratic Party, and that is reflected in the agreement. So you espouse the opinions of the Democratic Party until a decision is reached. If you have been persuasive enough, and they abide and can afflict with your own decision, opinions, then obviously now we begin to run government using the opinions espoused by minority in government. So, but ideally what they are trying to do is how do we establish a transition that respects the establishment of robust political organizations that are ideologically anchored, and establishing a cross-sectional command structure for all the political organizations based on substantial reasons for establishment of those parties. So it has now a process. That is why I told people that in Uganda, we are actually supposed to be compared to the 1991 of Kenya, not now. Why? Because that was the time when parties were now free. What we are doing now ought to have been done in 2005, before the parties were free. But because I told you that the freedom of political parties in Uganda in 2002, and I want people to cluster freedoms of parties. The freedoms of parties that were orchestrated in Africa before 2002 are different from those that were obtained after 2002, because the objective reasons were different.
What is the difference?
The difference is those countries that freed parties in 2002 did not free those parties for democratic purposes, but majorly to qualify for grants before the G8 under the Africa Vision Plan. And I told you that those are the economic programs. One is espoused by Obasanjo of Nigeria, then Mbeki of South Africa, then Abdoulaye Wade of Senegal, then and Bouteflika of Algeria, then at Kanonasi. When an agreement was reached and that all of those to access grants, with which they can even establish universal primary education, pursuant to the 1998 decision of the main committee of the IMF, where the chairman was the Chancellor of the Exchequer of Britain, Gordon Brown at the time. Now, those were only qualifications for grants. That is why in
So
Uganda,
it wasn't the right spirit.
it was not the spirit. In Uganda, parties were not free so that they begin working. Even the president told you, we are only freeing ourselves from the multi-party system. So we don't have multi-party political dispensation. The dispensation is not going to begin now. We are going to enact laws. Parties are going to merge because they have got opinions that are similar. Parties are going to merge because they think that they are going to have an outlook of Uganda. The trajectory that they want to espouse for Uganda is uniform. Then we will now rid ourselves of the kind of politics that is based on celebrity panjandram, where people think they can vote for you simply because you have been to prison. Now they don't even think, what are we beginning to bend and calling it leadership? So we are now going to set a serious field for the freedom of political.
What makes you believe, Honorable, that now is the time, never before?
You see,
is it because you've seen Democratic Party, where the Vice President take it and come up with a cooperation agreement? Or is it because we are seeing what Jema, PPP and others are doing in this by-election? What are the factors that you think are going to compel the genesis of that?
One, I think there is a renaissance of thought in the mind of the President of Uganda that we need now a rebirth of political leadership in Uganda. And because he has established, there is what we call the suo rule in the law, where somebody on his own emotion concedes that this is what should be done. Any changes in Uganda, the program of such change must only be governed by the beginning of a new thought with President Museveni. Even in Kenya, if President Moi did not actually think of leaving power and establishing a level playing field with which power can be granted to another person, Kenya would not be the way it is. Even today, it is only when the President of the Republic of Uganda is not on the ballot paper and is promised that those on the ballot paper are not promising help his own lifestyle after power, that we shall then have a level playing field for political reasons. Now, there are political parties in Uganda, but there is one which is unregistered, and that is biology. It also applies to all individuals. The degree of magnitude of an individual. For example, President Museveni is not as strong as he was in 1986. We have just been talking about something here. In 1986, you would look at his convoys with the Santana vehicles and a few guns, and clearly he was a symbol of power. Now, added to his vehicle, you may think he's actually shifting from one home to another. Carries everything, a kitchen, a toilet, everything. So that means he is not as strong as he was, but he's brighter than he was. He looks forward to peace more than he did then. Peace, by necessary interpretation, then meant quarreling, absence of war. And in fact, now, peace means the establishment of peace. Now, he looks at himself as deserving of more peace than he did the other time. So, we are now beginning to look at a better way for Uganda. And this is the only way political parties are going to be established.
Very interesting. Well, we are with Honorable MUKASA MBIDDE, Deputy Vice President, but also member of the East African Legislative Assembly, where he has done his 10 years. Come December, he will have done his 10 years.
I'll go to the video.
But let's also understand, Honorable, you see, everything foundation matters.
Yes.
We have the traditional parties, UPC, DP, this we may not take it in that way. Then we have this that came like a bushfire, not from people power. Do you think when you look into our political parties, they have the right foundations and these can sustain a peaceful, civilized transformation that you're talking about?
Yes, indeed. And when we talk about political parties, we don't necessarily think we are talking about the nomenclature of the parties that exist now. We may not be talking about DP the way it is, NRM the way it is, NUP the way it is. We are talking about cause and effect. The basis of the body politic in Uganda for a very long period of time under the article, the infamous Article 269 of the Constitution that was repealed, established what we call individual merit. Now, individual merit had a predatory nature against party freedoms. That an individual became sacrosanct. An individual thought about himself as possessed of superior knowledge in terms of decision making over and above political parties. Now, when those very many individuals now that are a basis and with the background of the individual merit that was established as a freedom by them, which was mysteriously again transmogrified into article in chapter 4 of the Constitution. You know, every individual now is superior. That is why a political party takes a decision, and you find individuals establishing cataclysm as if they themselves now are a political party. It is because they have not yet construed the operations of political organizations. They don't know. A political party, you know, a party is always right. You and I can make a mistake, but not the party. Once a party takes a decision, it is the embodiment of the will of all of the voters and members of that party. So these are lessons and lectures that our people will receive. Now, people with uniform minds are going to form parties. People with uniform minds are going to form coalitions. People with uniform minds, in terms of where Uganda will go, are going to disintegrate from political parties and form clusters that will eventually become parties. Now, resources are also key. Most of the people, a series of persons have also, of course, benefited from knowledge of operations of state. Those that have been part of the same thing that Kenya did. Because, you know, when you look at Kenya, those that have won, those that have lost, those that intended to come, they have all been members of state. So at one point in time, so they know what they want for Kenya. Uganda, that is the way we are going to head. So I can safely assure you that this is going to be a fresh beginning. It cannot be a matter of 1 month or two. But I think because it is going to be a beginning, we are getting prepared.
Very interesting. Well, time is also much on our side. But before I let you go, you're a member of the East African Legislative Assembly. Let's, in about a minute or two, let's talk about Kenya, William Ruto's victory.
Yes. Of course, personally, I congratulate him upon this victory. But those who know Kenya know that actually the process of election is still ongoing. It can only be concluded at the Supreme Court. There are challenges that are paramount. The Constitution of the Republic of Kenya, and clearly now, the Supreme Court is going to be filled with two to three major grounds. The first ground will be anchored in Chapter 6 of integrity, because there is still an application before that court against the deputy president, even intending to stop him from swearing in. So question is arise: can a president swear in without a deputy president with whom they appeared on the same ballot paper? Those are questions, and grounds will definitely be also decided before the Constitution the Supreme Court. Now, number two, whether the chairperson, Independent Boundaries and Electoral Commission of Kenya, Mr. Chebukati, whether he is a national returning officer. That is under Article 88 to the Constitution of Kenya. That constitution doesn't establish that office as a national returning officer. It rather establishes the commission as a detail that arrives at its decisions by consensus. Not unanimity, but consensus. Consensus which definitely implies a decision based on the majority in the circumstances. Now, there is a wealth of jurisprudence on that matter. And clearly, I can assure you, those are matters that are going to find themselves before the Supreme Court of Kenya. Three, whether the substantive detail of election was followed. From the filing of Forms 34A, 34B that was even posted on public portal. Now, 34C and D, the contention is going to be now whether the procedures between the establishment and hosting of Forms 34C and D, because ultimately D is what is handed over to the winner of an election and accordingly there is going to be a lot of jurisprudence there. And Kenya is known. They have, I think, established a robust system of judicial activity. We think a lot is yet to happen. In the interim, we can congratulate him, and we think Kenya has again shown the world that it can peacefully conduct an election.
Well, I want to thank you so much, Honorable Fred MUKASA MBIDDE, who is the DP Vice President, but also member of the East African Legislative Assembly. Thank you for your time. We hope to be hosting